My sister accidentally blurted out during a family dinner that I was the embarrassment we don't talk about. A few days later, she begged me to sponsor her college tuition, and I just sipped my wine. Julia, 32, I have a sister named Leah, 26, and we used to be really close. Not so much anymore. Things got bad between us after our parents divorced, and we drifted apart. I tried to keep the peace, but during one of our family dinners, Leah dropped an explosive shell. She called me the embarrassment we don't talk about in front of everyone, like, casually, while talking to our parents. A few days later, she called me asking for help with her college tuition. I don't know if I was more shocked by her words or the audacity of her asking for my help after all that, but I just sipped my wine and stayed silent. Here's the full story. It was the fall of a year I'd rather forget. The air was crisp, the kind of cold that tells you winter's just around the corner. It was the first family dinner we'd had in a long time. Mom was trying to make some sort of tradition out of it, something to bring us all together after the divorce. But the thing is, there were a lot of unspoken things between us now, and family dinners had become more like tense, obligatory meetings than warm reunions. Leah had arrived first, of course, and I could already tell from the way she sat on the far side of the table, with Travis beside her, that she was in one of her "don't talk to me" moods. She barely acknowledged me when I walked in, just gave me a half-hearted wave that didn't reach her eyes. I couldn't blame her. After all, things between us hadn't been great for a while. It wasn't that we hated each other. It was just the distance. She sided more with Dad after the divorce, and I stuck with Mom. In the beginning, I thought we'd bounce back, that it was just a phase. But that phase dragged on longer than expected. I felt like Leah was holding a lot of resentment against me for reasons I couldn't quite figure out, and honestly, I started resenting her for not even trying to understand me. As the evening progressed, I noticed my mom's nervous glances. She was trying to get everyone to relax, forcing us to engage in casual conversation, but I could feel the tension in the air. My dad was busy cracking jokes about work, clearly more interested in his own world than what was going on with us. And then there was Leah, with her arms crossed, sipping on her wine, eyes glancing everywhere except in my direction. It was in the middle of a lull in conversation when it happened. My mom had just passed the mashed potatoes, and I reached for them at the same time as Leah. We both paused, our hands brushing awkwardly. I tried to break the silence with something neutral, but before I could even say anything, Leah, with that cold indifference I'd grown so used to, spoke up. "You know, it's kind of funny," she said, as if it were the most casual statement in the world. She turned toward our parents, but her gaze lingered on me for a brief moment. "It's like we don't talk about Julia anymore. Like, she's the embarrassment we don't discuss." I froze. I didn't even know how to process the words coming out of her mouth. I felt like the room had just been absorbed out of the air. It wasn't even the harshness of the words, it was the casualness with which she said it, like it was a fact everyone already knew. She took another sip of her wine, not even waiting for a reaction. My dad, thankfully, was quick to intervene, though his voice lacked conviction. "Leah, that's enough," he said, his eyes flicking to me nervously, clearly uncomfortable with the sudden shift in the atmosphere. But Leah didn't care. She just shrugged, like it wasn't a big deal. "I'm just saying," she muttered under her breath. "It's like no one acknowledges it, but it's so obvious." I felt heat rise in my face, but I stayed silent. What was there to say? I wanted to lash out, to scream that I wasn't the mess she thought I was, but it felt like too much effort. I could feel the weight of my mom's eyes on me, but she didn't say a word. Her silence stung more than anything. The dinner continued, but I barely tasted my food. I picked up my plate, focusing on anything except the people at the table. My mom kept trying to steer the conversation into safe territory, talking about old neighbors, asking about my work, but the damage had been done. Leah's words echoed in my head long after the dinner was over. I went to bed that night with a hollow feeling in my chest, but it wasn't until a few days later that everything would truly hit me. The phone rang early one morning, an unfamiliar number on the screen. I almost didn't answer, but then I saw it was Leah's number. Curiosity got the better of me, and I picked up. "Hey," Leah said, her voice sounding uncharacteristically small on the other end. I need to ask you something." I frowned, confused. "What is it?" There was a long pause. I could hear her breathing, like she was trying to gather the courage to speak. I'm applying to college," she began, hesitating. "And I need help with the tuition." I blinked. This wasn't what I expected at all. I didn't know whether to laugh or to hang up, but instead, I just waited. "I've been looking into loans and grants, but I can't get enough. I know it's a lot, but I was hoping you could help me out. You know, with the tuition?" She sounded more vulnerable than I'd ever heard her. There was something almost desperate in her voice. I was taken aback. After what she had said about me at the dinner, I couldn't wrap my head around her asking me for help. The audacity. The sheer nerve. How could she, after all that? After calling me the embarrassment we don't talk about? I didn't know what to say. I wasn't angry, not exactly, but I was completely numb. I let the silence stretch on, just listening to her breathing on the other end, waiting for me to respond. I reached for my wine glass on the counter and took a slow sip, hoping the alcohol would somehow make this conversation easier to digest. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, I spoke. "Leah," I said, keeping my voice calm, "I think you're on your own with this one." She was silent for a moment, and I could almost hear her processing the words, trying to understand what I meant. I didn't say anything more, just took another sip of wine, letting the weight of her request sink in. After a long pause, Leah let out a sigh. "Okay," she said softly, before hanging up. I didn't call her back. I didn't need to. The decision had been made. Days passed, and the silence between Leah and me was deafening. She didn't reach out, and I didn't either. At some point, I realized that this was the new normal. We had crossed some line that I didn't think could be uncrossed. And while I wasn't thrilled with the idea of cutting ties with my sister, I also realized I didn't need to carry the weight of her judgment anymore. I didn't need her approval. As the holidays approached, I didn't even bother thinking about how it would feel to be around her again. In fact, when Mom suggested another family gathering, I almost dreaded it. But then I remembered, I was done pretending. I was done trying to fix something that couldn't be fixed. I didn't have to be the person Leah wanted me to be. And so, I sipped my wine. And life went on. It wasn't until the following summer that I ran into Leah again. I had been out running errands when I noticed her walking down the street near the old corner store, the one we used to frequent as kids. I almost didn't recognize her at first. She looked different, but not in a good way. There was something worn out in her expression, like the weight of the world was on her shoulders. I didn't know why, but I felt a strange pang of sympathy for her at that moment. I slowed my pace as I approached her. She hadn't noticed me yet, but when she did, her face went from neutral to something that resembled mild discomfort. She looked like she might turn and walk away, but I wasn't about to let her do that. "Leah," I said, my voice surprising me with its calmness. She stopped, her eyes flicking up to meet mine. For a moment, we just stood there, neither of us saying anything. It felt strange, like we had been strangers for far too long, and yet, we weren't. We shared history, too much history for us to pretend we didn't care. "Hey," she finally said, her voice tight. "Didn't expect to run into you here." "Yeah, me neither," I replied. "Have you been?" She shrugged, but it was an exaggerated gesture, like she was trying to act unaffected. But I could tell she wasn't. "You know, same old, same old. Things have been tough." "Tough how?" I asked, trying to keep my tone neutral. I wasn't sure if I wanted to hear the answer, but curiosity pushed me forward. Leah hesitated, biting her lip. "Well, I guess I've been having a rough time with everything. College, my job. Things haven't really worked out the way I thought they would." I didn't get the scholarship I was hoping for, and I've been struggling with finances. It's been a mess. I didn't say anything at first. My mind was flooded with thoughts, everything she had said during that dinner, everything that had happened after. And yet, here she was, standing in front of me, vulnerable in a way I hadn't expected. You didn't get the scholarship? I asked cautiously. Leah nodded, her eyes dropping to the ground for a moment. She took a deep breath before looking back up at me. I know I messed up. I should have taken things more seriously, but everything just got away from me, you know? I didn't realize how much trouble I was in until it was too late. For a second, I thought about the phone call from months ago, when she'd asked me for tuition help, but I didn't bring it up. I didn't need to. The weight of that conversation was still hanging between us, unspoken. Instead, I just nodded. I get it. Things can get overwhelming. She glanced at me then, almost as if she were waiting for some kind of reaction, but I didn't offer her pity. I didn't need to. She didn't need my sympathy, and I didn't owe her an explanation for why I hadn't helped her before. You know, I said after a long pause, I don't really know what to say. We've been through a lot. But I want you to know I'm not the same person I was back then. I'm not going to just take things on the chin anymore. Leah looked at me, a flicker of understanding in her eyes. It wasn't the type of apology I was waiting for, but it was as close as she was going to get. And honestly, I didn't need her to apologize anymore. The past had happened, and we had to face the present now. You don't have to say anything, Leah muttered. I get it. I don't know what I expected. For a moment, we just stood there, two people who had once been so close and now felt like strangers. I knew there was still a lot left unsaid between us, but I couldn't force her to say it. She had to come to terms with her own actions, just as I had to with mine. I think I should go, she added, suddenly looking uncomfortable with the silence. Yeah, I said, nodding. Take care of yourself, Leah. She turned to leave, but then paused, looking over her shoulder at me. I don't know if I'm ever going to get it right, Julia. I just don't know if I'll ever make up for what I said. I was quiet for a moment, considering her words. I wasn't sure if she was expecting forgiveness, or if she was just speaking out of frustration. But I realized that forgiveness, whether I gave it or not, wouldn't change anything at this point. I had to live my life the way I wanted, not based on how Leah, or anyone else, saw me. You don't have to, I said softly. You don't have to make up for it. Just do better for yourself. She nodded, her shoulders slumping slightly before she turned and walked away. I stood there for a while, watching her leave. It was strange. There was this part of me that wanted to reach out, to make everything right, to try to fix our broken relationship. But another part of me knew that maybe it was too late for that. Some things couldn't be fixed, no matter how hard we tried. I walked back to my car slowly, letting the quiet of the moment settle around me. It wasn't closure, not exactly. But it was something. We'd both said our piece, in our own way. Now, it was up to us to figure out where we went from here. The following weeks went by without much contact. Leah stayed quiet, and I didn't bother reaching out to her either. There was a strange peace in the distance, a sense of acceptance that had been missing for a long time. It wasn't that I didn't care about her anymore. I did. But I couldn't keep sacrificing my own peace for someone who wasn't ready to meet me halfway. And then, one night, my mom called. She sounded different, more urgent than usual. Julia, I need to talk to you, she said, her voice strained. It's about Leah. Is she okay? I asked immediately, a knot forming in my stomach. She's not doing well, Mom replied. She's been struggling. I don't know if you've heard, but she's been skipping classes, not showing up for work. I think she's lost. My heart sank. It wasn't like I hadn't expected something like this to happen. I'd seen the signs before, in the way Leah shut down, the way she distanced herself from everything. But hearing my mom say it aloud made it all too real. I'm worried about her, Mom continued. But she won't listen to me. She won't listen to anyone. I didn't know how to respond. Part of me felt angry, like Leah had brought this on herself, but another part of me felt sympathy for her. I knew the pressure she was under. College, relationships, life. It all piled up. You know, Mom said, her voice quieter now, maybe you could try talking to her. She might listen to you. She always used to. I thought about that. I didn't know if it was a good idea. After everything that had happened, I wasn't sure if I could be the one to fix things. I didn't even know if I wanted to. But deep down, I knew I couldn't just turn my back on her. I'll think about it, I said, my voice more uncertain than I meant it to be. Please, Mom urged. She needs you, Julia. I didn't say anything after that. The line went quiet as I thought about the past, about Leah, about us, and what, if anything, we could still salvage. The next few days felt like a strange waiting game. I wasn't sure if I was more unsure of reaching out to Leah or afraid of what the conversation might bring. My mom's voice still echoed in my head, pleading with me to make the first move, to reach out and try to repair something that had long been broken. But the more I thought about it, the more I questioned whether it would even make a difference. Leah had made her position clear. She wasn't going to make things easy. And I wasn't exactly in the best place either. The rift between us felt too deep, too ingrained, to be mended with a simple phone call or awkward conversation. Yet, that night, after a long day of work, I found myself calling her number. I didn't even know why I picked up the phone. It wasn't like I had a plan, or knew what to say. Maybe it was just the worry gnawing at me after hearing what my mom had said. Maybe it was because despite everything, despite the hurt she had caused me, I couldn't completely abandon her. The phone rang 3 times before she picked up. Hello? Leah's voice was soft, almost hesitant, like she wasn't expecting to hear from me. Leah, I said, my voice betraying my nerves. It's Julia. There was a pause on the other end, and I could practically hear her trying to gauge the tone of my voice, deciding whether this was a confrontation or an olive branch. Oh. Hi, she replied, a little too quietly. I could tell she hadn't expected me to call. I'd been thinking about what Mom said, I continued. About you. About how things have been. Hard for you. Leah didn't say anything at first. I could hear the hesitation in her breathing. Yeah, things have been tough, she admitted finally, her voice cracking just a little. I guess I've been avoiding everyone, including you. I could hear the vulnerability in her words, and despite everything that had happened, something inside me softened. This wasn't the same Leah who had called me the embarrassment we don't talk about. This wasn't the same Leah who had shrugged off her mistakes with such coldness. No, this was a person who was struggling, and maybe, just maybe, she didn't know how to ask for help without feeling like a failure. I don't know what to say, Leah, I said, my voice more gentle now. But I don't want you to feel like you're all alone in this. You're not. Even if we're not as close as we used to be, you're still my sister. There was a long silence on the other end of the line, so long that I almost thought she'd hung up. But then she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't know how to fix things between us. I don't even know where to start. The words hit me harder than I expected. Leah had always been the one to shut down, to push people away, and hearing her admit that she didn't know how to fix it made me realize just how much she had been struggling on her own. Maybe she had never learned how to deal with things, how to face the reality of her own actions. I don't have all the answers either, Leah, I said honestly. But we can figure this out. We can take it one step at a time if you want. But you have to want that too. She was silent again, and I waited, giving her time to process. It wasn't like I expected some magical resolution from one phone call, but I needed to know if she was willing to try. Finally, she sighed, long and deep. I don't know if I'm ready. I've screwed up so many times, and I don't know how to get back from all that. I'm not asking you to go back, I said, feeling a quiet firmness in my words. You can't go back, Leah. But you can start moving forward. And you don't have to do it alone. She didn't respond right away, but I could hear the raw emotion in the silence. She was processing. And maybe, for the first time in a long time, she was actually listening. I'll try, she finally said. I'll try, Julia. But it's going to take time. Good, I replied, feeling a sense of relief flood through me. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was something. We don't have to fix everything at once. Just take it one day at a time. We spoke for a little while longer, the conversation drifting between awkward pauses and hesitant confessions. Leah told me about how she'd been struggling with her college classes, how she felt completely lost in the chaos of it all. She talked about how hard it was to admit that she couldn't do everything on her own. I listened, really listened, and it was the first time in a while that I felt like we were on the same page again. When we finally ended the call, I felt exhausted, but there was also this small seed of hope planted in my chest. Maybe, just maybe, things could be different between us. Maybe we could rebuild some of what had been broken. But I knew it wouldn't be easy, and I didn't expect it to happen overnight. The weeks after that phone call were awkward, to say the least. There were no grand reconciliations, no tearful apologies, just small steps towards some kind of understanding. Leah reached out occasionally, texting me here and there, asking how I was doing. I kept the conversations light at first, not wanting to dive into everything too quickly. But slowly, we started talking more, about things other than the past. There were still moments when the old tensions crept up, moments when I could feel that distance between us, like it was too thick to cut through. But at least we were trying. That was the most important thing. One evening, about a month after our first real conversation, Leah showed up at my door unannounced. She looked nervous, wringing her hands together as she stood on the porch. "Can I come in?" she asked, her voice soft, unsure. I hesitated for a moment, but something inside me urged me to say yes. "Yeah, of course," I replied, stepping aside to let her in. She walked in slowly, like she wasn't sure if she belonged there anymore. I led her to the living room, and we sat down across from each other. There was an awkwardness between us, a tension in the air that hadn't quite been cleared. But there was also something else, a quiet understanding, a recognition that we were both trying to navigate the mess we'd created. After a long moment of silence, Leah spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm sorry, Julia. For everything. For what I said, for how I treated you. I don't know what was wrong with me. I didn't know how to handle everything, and I took it out on you. You didn't deserve that." I had been expecting an apology for a long time, but hearing it finally come from her mouth caught me off guard. The vulnerability in her words was something I hadn't seen in years. I looked at her for a long time, taking in the woman she had become, the one who was finally starting to acknowledge her mistakes, the one who wanted to make things right. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. "I'm not perfect either, Leah," I said quietly. "But I'm willing to try again." "I think we both are." She nodded, her eyes welling up with emotion, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like there was a chance for us to rebuild something, slowly, carefully, but with the possibility of healing. It wasn't going to be easy, and it wasn't going to happen overnight, but maybe that was okay. Maybe it was time for us to start over, one step at a time. And maybe, just maybe, it was worth trying after all. As the weeks went on, things between Leah and me continued to progress, but it was a slow process. We talked, we patched things up little by little, but it was clear that the underlying tension was still there. The damage wasn't easily forgotten. There were moments when I felt like we were making progress, and then there were others when I wondered if we were just going through the motions. But life, as it often does, has a way of testing our resolve. It wasn't long before Leah came to me with another request, one that made the old feelings of betrayal resurface faster than I could have anticipated. It was a Thursday afternoon when I got the call. Julia, I really need to talk to you, Leah said, her voice sounding strained over the phone. It's about something important. I didn't like the sound of it. What is it? I've been thinking, she started, hesitating. I'm in a tough spot again. I need some help. Financially. You know, I've been struggling with tuition and everything, and I thought we talked about this already. I cut her off, trying to keep my voice steady but firm. You can't keep asking me for money, Leah. It's not fair to either of us. She sighed on the other end. I know. But you've always been able to make things work, and Leah, I interrupted, my voice sharp now, I'm not your backup. I'm not your safety net anymore. If you've learned anything from our past, it's that I'm not here to bail you out every time you make a mistake. You need to take responsibility for your own life. There was a long pause on the other end, and I could almost hear her jaw clenching. I know, okay? I get it. But please. I'm really struggling here. I don't know who else to turn to. For a moment, I felt a flicker of sympathy for her, the same way I had months ago. But then I remembered what she'd said about me at that dinner. I remembered how she'd called me the family embarrassment, how she had brushed me off like I didn't matter. I remembered how she never once apologized for the way she had treated me. And in that moment, I realized something that made my chest tighten. No matter how much I tried to fix things with Leah, she would always see me as lesser. She would always believe that she deserved more, that she could count on me to swoop in and save her when things went wrong. I didn't want to keep being the person she came running to every time she messed up. It wasn't about being cruel, it was about standing up for myself, about drawing a line that shouldn't have been crossed so many times before. No, I said firmly, the word hanging in the air like a verdict. I can't help you. I won't. There was a silence on the other end that seemed to stretch on for eternity. I could feel the weight of her shock, her disbelief, and perhaps, just perhaps, a little bit of regret. Are you serious? She asked, her voice trembling now. Yeah, I said, my tone even but resolute. I'm serious. I've done enough for you, Leah. You need to figure this out on your own. We can't keep doing this. I didn't give her a chance to respond. I ended the call and set my phone down, feeling a strange sense of relief flood through me. It wasn't a victory, exactly. But it was a turning point. I had finally taken a stand for myself, and that was enough. A few days later, I found out that Leah had made a rash decision. Desperate to finish college, she took out a high-interest loan to cover her tuition, something she had sworn she would never do. It was a risky move, but in her mind, it was the only option left. She was trying to fix everything all on her own, and failing miserably. Word of Leah's decision reached me through my mom, who was, as usual, trying to keep things from spiraling out of control. Did you hear what Leah did? Mom asked, sounding exasperated. She took out that loan to pay for school. She's so worried about falling behind. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I sat back in my chair, my mind racing. I knew what my mom was thinking, how she wanted to help Leah, how she was worried about her future. But I had reached my limit. I had been enabling Leah for too long, and now it was time for her to face the consequences of her own choices. I told her I couldn't help her anymore, I finally said, my voice steady. She needs to learn how to stand on her own 2 feet. I've done all I can. Mom was silent on the other end. I know, she said quietly. But I'm worried, Julia. She's always been like this, thinking she can get by without fully dealing with the consequences of her actions. I sighed, rubbing my temples. She needs to hit rock bottom before she can climb back up. I can't keep saving her, Mom. I have my own life to live. Mom didn't argue. She knew I was right, even if it hurt to admit it. Months passed, and the situation with Leah continued to unravel. Her loan payments became more difficult to manage, and she found herself slipping further into debt. She tried to reach out to me several times, asking for advice or help, but each time I gently reminded her that she had to figure things out on her own. It wasn't that I didn't care. I did. But I was no longer willing to play the role of her savior. She needed to face the reality of her decisions, and I wasn't going to let her drag me back into her mess. It was around that time that I heard about something that felt like justice, a quiet kind of revenge. Leah's loan had become such a burden that she could no longer keep up with payments. Eventually, her financial situation became public knowledge, and her credit score tanked. Her ability to get another loan for anything, let alone a future education, became almost impossible. And yet, I wasn't gloating. I didn't feel any satisfaction in her failure. What I felt was this strange peace, this quiet sense of knowing that I had finally let go of the idea that I could save her. I had done what I could. I tried to help. But Leah's choices were her own, and it was time for her to understand the full weight of them. A year passed, and I was on my way to a family event, another one of my mom's reunions, where we were all supposed to pretend that things were fine. I wasn't particularly excited about seeing Leah again, but I'd come to terms with it. I had moved on, and I wasn't carrying the same weight anymore. When I arrived, Leah was already there, sitting off to the side, her face a little more tired, a little more worn. It was clear that life had been tough on her, and as I walked in, she glanced up at me. "Hey," she said quietly, her voice almost apologetic. I know we've been through a lot. And I don't expect anything from you, but I just wanted to say. I'm sorry. For everything. I really screwed up." For a moment, I just looked at her, seeing how far she had fallen and how much she had grown in the process. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't the apology I had always wanted, but it was enough. It was her way of taking accountability, something she hadn't done before. "I know, Leah," I said, my voice calm but firm. "And I think it's time we both moved forward. I'm not going to carry the weight of your mistakes anymore. But I hope you figure things out. For your sake." Leah nodded, a few tears welling up in her eyes. "I will. I swear." I didn't say anything else. I didn't need to. This was the closure I had been waiting for, quiet, understated, but deeply satisfying. She had finally seen the consequences of her actions, and I had finally found peace with my decision to step away. And that, in the end, was the revenge I had been looking for. Not in any dramatic or cruel way, but in the quiet strength of walking away from the toxic cycle and taking control of my own life. It was enough.